All right, it's 2:30. My name is Rob Plummer. I know many of you many of you as a Greek teacher, but I also wear a hat as the director of the Faith and Work Project at Southern Seminary. I'm really excited about people thinking about all of their lives as for the glory of God, the work they do from 9 to 5, and for us as churches to know better how to equip the people in our churches who are doing that work. It's a special privilege today that we get to hear from Bill English. The title of his talk to us is The Call to Business Ownership: How Churches Can Equip and Train Entrepreneurs for Marketplace Ministry. Mr. English is an experienced entrepreneur himself. He is an author, a speaker, an advisor who specializes in small business ownership issues. And I should mention, you may have heard it if you came on a few moments ago, we are recording this, so it will be posted. If you ask a question, that will be recorded, so just be aware of that. And then it will be posted later at thefaithandworkproject.com, thefaithandworkproject.com, or through our YouTube channel, Faith and Work Project YouTube channel. Also in the chat bar, expect to hear from my assistant, Jarrett Ford. Will be using a random number generator to choose 5 people to get a free book. I know Mr. English has written many books, but most recently, let me show you, he has written A Christian Theology of Business Ownership. I have read through this book myself. I found it very helpful, and I've already recommended it to other people in my church. We're going to be giving away 5 of these. And so Jarrett will follow up with you in the chat bar. I think he'll be probably individually chatting with you to get your address to send the book to. So without any further introduction, I'm going to pass this on to Mr. English. Thanks again for being here today. And I'll just give an applause for you on behalf of the rest of these Zoom people. All right. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Dr. Plummer. It's good to be with everybody today. Do I have the ability to share my screen? I do. It's green. Okay. So these slides that I'm going to share here are they are out at my site, bibleandbusiness.com, and you are welcome to see them. And you are not seeing the actual slide presentation, so we're just going to leave this in good old on presentation mode. Yeah, by the way, my son David is in the MDiv program at Southern, and that was how Dr. Plummer and I became introduced. And so I appreciate David being at Southern, and I appreciate Southern as well. I did my MDiv at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School back in the mid-'80s, so that'll give you an idea as to how old I might be. So let's go ahead and get started. This is going to be a participatory session, or it's going to be very short, one of the two. So I will stop and ask questions along the way and see if we can't get a good dialogue going here. So when I was writing my book, A Christian Theology of Business Ownership, I was kind of wondering why churches pay so little attention to business owners. We pay attention to men, to women, to mothers, to dads, to divorcees, to picking probably another half dozen to a dozen demographics. We pay attention to those demographics, but for whatever reason, we don't pay a lot of attention to actual business owners. And yet business owners, you know, all ministry is funded by profitable business. There's no giving that happens without somewhere in the food chain, profitable business generating wealth and excess wealth. So I wanted to take a section in my book, and I thought, well, what would it look like for a local church to actually start a ministry to business owners? And that's what this presentation is about today. So you've already seen a copy of my book. Thank you, Dr. Plummer, for doing that. So let's dive in. What can local churches do to grow new stewards who own for-profit businesses? So what am I really asking here? The question that I'm trying to get at is, does an assumption here in theology that all business owners are actually stewards of that which God has given to them, right? We know from Psalms that God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. We know that there isn't anything that we have that God doesn't own. So really, in a very real sense, all we are as business owners are really stewards of that which God has entrusted to us. And so what can local churches do to grow new stewards in the marketplace? I'm talking about for-profit businesses now. What can they do to grow guys like me in the marketplace? And so I wanted to offer some ideas on that this morning. So let me start here. I think the first thing you have to do is gain the support of your pastors and your elders. Now, I'm in the Evangelical Free Church. I'm not in the Baptist Church. We have elders. It's primarily how our governance works. And so 3 questions here that came to mind when I was writing this section. First of all, what does the church, or how does the church decide which ministry ideas to directly support? And you guys might have some different ideas across different local churches as to how elder boards and pastoral staffs decide which businesses, or not businesses, which new ideas actually get the cycles and maybe some funding from the church. Can 1 or 2 of you speak to how your churches decide which ministry ideas to support? You don't need my permission to speak, just unmute and talk, I guess.
Can you hear me?
Yes, David.
One of the things that we're trying to do is we're transitioning to the idea of not just supporting a particular work, because our church would not be big enough to support more than just a few works. What we do is we decided to support individuals, and then the individuals are free to go and do their ministry. We hold them accountable theologically. We love them and support them, but they still manage their own work, and we help them make decisions when necessary, but we don't oversee their work. We oversee them.
Okay. All right. Someone else?
I'm representing Australia.
Hi, Mark.
Yeah, down under. It would predominantly be, I think, for a majority of the churches, and I'm talking from the Presbyterian denomination, it's largely is around where the pastor's interest lies and his passion. So I think that if he came and he had a heart for, say, inland Australia or something like that, that naturally carries the congregation, or that pastor would naturally carry the congregation with them in terms of supporting that ministry.
You know, in the church that I attend, we have a history of people coming to the elders and saying, I want to start this ministry. And the elders just saying, yeah, go for it. And so our ministry has just has been like a shotgun, a scatter shotgun. And we haven't had focus to what we were doing within the church. And so I'm an elder now in my church. And one of the things I'm learning is that the elders are not really interested in new ideas like this. If you want to do this on your own time, in your own way, your own house bill, go for it, but don't come to us. So you'll find that different local churches have different ideas as to how they want to do this. But if the local church is going to support a ministry to for-profit business owners and entrepreneurs who want to start businesses, I think you're going to need to get them on board. Does it feel odd to say that a business owners or business leaders, that's a valid group who should be actively supported by a local church? Does that feel odd to you guys? No, I'm seeing head shake no. And I'm not seeing a lot of, go ahead.
Not at all, because they're human beings that need to be ministered to.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I set up an operation over in Europe, and we were in a very, very small city. And we were trying to get out of the communist mindset into a Christian family business mindset of the company in America. And in so doing, I had almost 200 employees and their families. And between marriage seminars, parenting seminars, Bible studies, ladies forums, church camps for kids, things like that, we had one of the biggest churches going.
Wow. Wow. That's great. Wow. I'll invite you to read through Hebrews 11, where we have that hall of fame of our church father. Just read through there and think through all the names that are there and how many of them are actually very successful in business in their day. Right? You can probably think of some names already, but that might be something that you'll want to do on your own. Secondly, you need to define the purpose and the audience for this ministry. And I just gave an example here in the slide. The purpose is to grow business owners into mature stewards for Jesus Christ. Because stewardship as a topic is really only thought of as good money management in most churches, and it doesn't have a broader context in which it is taught. Most business owners know how to make money and they know how to write checks. And that's about the extent of how they view the integration of their faith with what they're doing during the week. They don't see themselves as stewarding a business that God owns, and they don't have a lot of purpose that is derived from the scriptures for why they are owning and running a business in the first place. They just know they enjoy it and they're good at it, and they couldn't imagine themselves doing anything else. And so, and like I said, they'll write the checks when the building funds come around, that kind of thing. But we want to grow them into mature stewards who understand the God's purposes for business and how they can implement those purposes in the marketplace as one of the elements that helps them bring Jesus Christ to their employees, partners, customers, vendors, and so forth. I think one of the things you're going to have to do if you start to head down this path of putting a group together of your business owners and maybe even your senior leaders like VPs and MPs, but they don't own the business necessarily. You have to decide if you want to minister to startups as opposed to already established businesses. Startups are a very different breed of business than established businesses. So I can tell you that I've run 5 different businesses now. The current one I'm running is a $24 million healthcare company, and I have 600 employees in the business. And I'm part of the ownership group. That's very different than the $2 million retail business that I ran a few years ago that had, I think, 7 or 8 employees. It's just a different set of problems, a different set of needs. And so I think you need to look at startups and whether you want to be in that. Because some people are going to come along and say, I want to start a business. I want to start a nannying business. And my business is me going out and nannying people. And is that where you want that to be in your group? And then finally decide if your ministry should divide along the size of business. So I could envision a church that had a robust ministry to business owners as having maybe a 0 to 2, a 2 to maybe 10, and then a 10 plus in terms of revenue size. And you'll find that you have people in all 3 camps in your church, and their needs will be different. So let me stop here and see what kind of questions or comments you all might have.
Bill, do you find that is the case, that in fact, most of the people you interact with have these individuals in all of these tiers in their ministries? Or perhaps that's the wrong way to ask it. Certainly not all, but is it common to find individuals in all these tiers? I'm trying to think through we have a church of about 600 people, right? We're not a large church by any stretch of the imagination. We've got some business owners, but I don't know that we'd be able to tier them in that way.
I've never seen a local church do this, so I don't have a context for this, Corey.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say. I'm in a church of similar size as you, and I can tell you that I know of 2 business owners that are well north of 50 million in revenue, but the others that I know are in the 1 to 3 million range.
Got it.
And I can tell you that their needs are different. Now, the stewardship principles And the God's purposes for business principles are identical. Size doesn't matter here, right?
Yeah.
But a pastor ministering to this group, or maybe a group of lay people ministering to this group, has to get real comfortable real fast with large dollar amounts.
For sure.
You can't be impressed with somebody who's getting a $8.5 million line of credit and they're going to use 5 of it right away. I mean, you got to be able to talk in numbers that the majority of the people don't talk in. You got to be able to pray with them when they say, I've got to lay off an entire division and I'm gonna shut down 200 jobs on Monday. That's just a different place that an owner is in compared to most of the other folks in your church. And they need somebody who can understand them and not, or I guess who can walk in that space.
Absolutely. You may end up getting to this, but I guess if I did break those, or if any minister did break those groups into smaller cohorts, for instance, how many individuals being ministered to constitutes a ministry? So if I have one business owner who's in that 2 to 10 range, is that individual now a ministry, or do I treat all of my business owners as the larger group?
I would start at all business owners as the larger group and let it naturally bifurcate or trifurcate over time. And I think most ministers and most churches will have to walk before they run on this one. You'll find that most of the third parties like C12, CBMC, and the other groups, they usually bifurcate at 2 million, 5 million, and then usually at 25 million, 20 or 25 million.
Thank you.
Yep.
Where does a pastor go to learn the language of business?
Amazingly enough, one of the places you could go is the Association for Corporate Growth, ACG. They do a lot of middle market M&A work, mergers and acquisitions work. They work with a lot of private equity, angel investors, bankers, lawyers, accountants. That's one of the core business groups. They're expensive. They're about $450, $500 a year. Plus you got to pay to go to the dinners and stuff like that. But you hang around them for a year. As a pastor, they'll go, "Why are you here?" But that's okay. They're nice people. And you hang around for a year and you'll learn more about business than you ever thought possible. The other place is get a subscription to the Harvard Business Review and just read HBR. Just read that. You can learn an awful lot from Harvard Business Review. That's, I want to say $12 or $20 a year or something like that. It's not expensive.
Do you have thoughts on other ways to divide up, or is really profit number the best, easiest way to divide up ministries?
Certain types of businesses will need to be coalesced together. So healthcare, if you have 4 or 5 business owners in healthcare, you might want to do a healthcare group, because healthcare is such a highly regulated, it's just a different beast than say retail or manufacturing or services, something like that. You can mix manufacturing and services, I think, reasonably well, but healthcare would be one that I would say you might want to, if you have enough, do a group there. And by the way, when I'm talking about these numbers, I'm talking about top line revenue. I'm not talking about profit numbers here. If I could make $2 million a year in profit, I may be on a beach in Fiji right now. So,
Bill, I'm curious, as just the thought comes to the back of my mind of James 2 and the danger of exalting Mr. Goldfinger who comes in. Like, is there a danger of, if we're classifying people this way, that kind of exalts, I don't know, like, how do you meet the needs of someone who's running a $50 million company while not seeming to treat them with favoritism in some way? Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah, I do. And we face the same thing with senior pastors who have 3,000 member churches, right? How do we not put people on a pedestal? I think you'll find most business owners if you get them alone, they're actually pretty humble about what they have. The good business owners will tell you that they've made every mistake in the book and that they are just blessed to have what they have. So this is part of what I was talking about, Dr. Plummer. Don't let the numbers influence how you minister, because it's the principles and the stewardship aspect that you're after, not necessarily treating, the $50 million guy may be not as good a business owner as the $1.5 million gal. It all depends on the vertical and the headwinds they're facing and so forth and so on.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
What do you see as the deliverable for such a meeting? What are you trying as a church to give to these people that you're reaching out to?
I'm trying to give them the messy middle, is what I call it. So business owners know how to make money, and the church knows that, and they know how to write checks. But that middle part, how do they use their business for Jesus Christ? That's what this ministry would help them accomplish. I think if you're, I estimate there's about 2 million Christian business owners in the United States, give or take. And the intro to my book goes through those numbers. I think if you were to go to those 2 million and say, would you like to use your business for Jesus Christ? I think 95% of them would go, yeah. How do I do that? And I think a ministry like this would help them understand how to be stewards rather than owners, and how to honor the Lord, not just by writing checks, but by fulfilling God's purposes for business in the marketplace, and seeing and the church to see them as part of the team, and for them to see themselves as part of the church's team. That what we're doing here in the marketplace is every bit as important as sending somebody to the mission field. Is that helpful, Dan?
It is, but at the same time, I'm actually involved in doing exactly these things from another angle. So, and having been there and having been ministered, for example, I was 8 years on the board of directors with Truth at Work, which is a C12 kind of a company out of Indianapolis, and they're working with the smaller size companies and more of the startups in a lot of cases. And then recently I found a thing called Faith Driven Entrepreneur. They've got a lot of stuff on Right Now Media, and JD Greer is involved with them and doing a lot of teaching, and all of it's directed straight at business owners that are trying to do exactly what you're doing. So, and I just, in fact, on Thursday had a meeting with the senior pastor at my church to say, I want to start this stuff up. I'm running a group right now. They've got an 8-week course where they take people through some of these kinds of questions. And I've got an international group. So I've got Germans, Polish, fellow from Romania, Lithuania, Indonesia. We're all going through this kind of material, having these kinds of discussions right now. And that's why I wanted to plug into what you guys are doing to see where you're going and what you might be able to add to the party.
Well, thank you, Dan. My call is not to start a ministry. I got a Bible and business moniker. That's just a place where I think out loud. My call from God is to write the content that guys like you will use. That's my call. So you're never going to, at least unless God changes my call, you're not going to find me trying to start a Bible and business ministry to business owners. My call is simply to write and generate content. That's what I do. That's what I'm good at. And I love doing it. But the C12s, the Truth at Works, the Faith Drivens, the CBMCs, and a whole bunch of other places like, colleges and universities, I hope that they use my content in whatever way that is helpful to them. So that's how you would plug me in.
And that's a good takeaway.
Yeah. So I don't ever care about being famous. It doesn't matter to me at all, but I do care about writing good content that others can use. That's my call. Well, let's move along here just a little bit. Yeah.
Could I ask you a question?
Yes, Brad.
Okay. I'm a graduate of Trinity also.
Yay.
Yeah, 1978.
I was 88.
Yeah. Here's my question. I'm 77 years old and have recently been working as a bagger in a grocery store. I don't really know a lot about business. I've spent most of my career in the field of teaching and environmental cleanup work for companies. I think if you ask the manager at the grocery store that I work at, if he's a Christian, he'd probably say, yeah, I'm a Christian. And I'm in a group of Christian men that started a ground up KVAT grocery stores in the Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, and Georgia area. And as a bagger, I've noticed there's a lot of employees there that would probably consider themselves Christian. But when I see products that are being sold in the store, I sometimes wonder whether they're doing more harm than they are good. They recently acquired a Starbucks kiosk, and Starbucks has a philosophy that is humanistic. It's not really Christian. It has humanistic values based upon the character of Starbucks in Herman Melville's book, Moby Dick. So if that business, that grocery store, and that whole chain of grocery stores were to become something you're describing in your ministry, how would that change? How would that change that organization?
Well, one of the four purposes I think God has for business is that business exists to provide a means to produce products that enable the community to flourish. And so business owners then would measure themselves against this somewhat vague standard. This isn't cookie cutter stuff here, right? But there's a lot that business puts out, from stuff that I like Captain Crunch cereal, which isn't good for you, to other kinds of products like hot dogs, probably not good for you. And a whole bunch of other things that aren't environmentally friendly, those kinds of things. This is something that really has to be decided between the business owner and God. Now, I go ahead and I have some biblical passages on products here in my book, and then I do go over some after the anointing here. Where is it? Consideration on producing products. So your products can enrich yourself at the expense of doing good for somebody else. I provide some principles, in other words. You have to look out for the interests of others. Those passages don't change. Products should provide a healing or restorative characteristic to broken situations. So in other words, if you own a liquor store, you don't sell liquor to alcoholics, right? Is it wrong to own a liquor store? No, in my view, but you have to be careful who you sell to. The concept of balance, developing or providing products that require someone to sin. There's a whole bunch of stuff here with that. But Brad, this isn't a really great answer to your question. I don't know how that grocery store would change, but it would change. And it would probably stop selling products that harm people or that cause people to sin.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, who's talking?
Can I ask a question? Just based on what you just said, it just made me think of something. Is that we've got two audiences, and maybe this is just so simplistic that you guys are way ahead of me. With what you and Brad just talked about, so we've got business owners that are Christians,
right?
And we've got business owners that are non-Christians, just like every other area of our society. So if those principles you just showed us in your book, you go scrolling down the page, those things are important to talk with a Christian who owns a business and to kind of show them, well, you know, if you own a liquor store, it's not sinful. You make a good point. I understand the theology there. But if you're talking to a non-Christian who owns a liquor store, just to use your example, we've got to get him the gospel first. So what I'm thinking, you know, there's no sense changing people's behaviors before they believe. There is some benefit for, you know, common grace in all of society, but for their salvation, the primary goal is to get them to believe in Jesus, or that, you know, where the harvest is plentiful, et cetera, et cetera. So my question is, saying what I just said, have you thought, or has anybody thought about how we can combine this so that we could get Christian business owners in our church, which we all have, to use this to further their own growth in Christ, but also to multiply the effects of growing the kingdom in the area of business?
I wrote for Christian business owners. I did not write for
Okay.
for those who are not saved.
Okay, and you know what? Thank you for telling me that, but okay, great.
But I encourage, you know, I encourage Christian business owners to get out in the marketplace and join Vistage, or join here in Minneapolis, it'd be called Allied Execs. Join those secular CEO peer groups, and they can be great salt and light in those groups. I belonged to Vistage for a while. I don't now. But those kinds of groups are really helpful, even if they aren't Christ-centered. They can still be very helpful. Number 3, as you're starting your group, hold yourself accountable. That's what this plan is. You need to do a learn, do, deliver, and resource. As you start the ministry, and this is really applicable across a number of different startups. I actually use this to help onboard key employees in my company. I love this learn, do, deliver. So what does your ministry need to learn in the first 90 days? What does it need to do? And what is it going to deliver back to the church in the first 180 days? What does it need to learn? What is it going to do? And what are you going to deliver? And as you progress through the time, you'll be able to more tightly define these lower rows, right? When you get to 360 days, you'll have a better idea of what you need at 540 days. So this is a way for you to say, here's what we need to do, and here's what we need to learn, here's what we need to deliver. And then assuming we do this, then we go on to the next phase. And one of the things it'll build credibility of your ministry back to the elders and the pastoral staff. And quite frankly, it'll hold you accountable to do what business owners do in business all the time anyways, right? We don't haphazardly do anything, at least, and stay in business for very long, I'll put it that way. Any questions about this learn, do, deliver?
I see that you have a series of posts, blogs, so forth. Is there some kind of let's say, an 8 or a 10 week series where we could meet once a week and go over a blog or some kind of a teaching or content that you have that would allow us to organize, focus, and take a group week by week through some kind of a process? Well,
Dan, you're the first person that's ever asked me that. So maybe we could connect offline. I mean, I got a lot of content. Do I have teaching materials? No. Could it be downstepped into teaching materials? Yes.
Well, if you're going to make a group, you've got to have a reason or something that you can, it's kind of like a Bible study. Let's pick
I see what you're asking. I see what, yeah, I cover that in a slide here coming up.
Okay.
I'm sorry. And by the way, on this next slide, I took the definitions right out of the book, what the learned is, what the do is, what the deliver is, and what the resources is. And this is all up at the blog post at Bible and Business. You can go grab that post and print it out in PDF format, or copy it down if you want to. This is also right out of my book as well.
Another question.
Yes.
When I was 14, I had a whooping cough and I was in northern Oklahoma, and there was only one hospital in the area that was about 20 miles from the town I lived in. My father had just been in a car wreck. My mother was killed, and it was a pretty trying time for a 14-year-old. My brother-in-law, who's a doctor, and sister had to leave, so they put me in the same hospital with my dad. I was in the room next door to him, and it turns out that it was run by the Roman Catholics in this predominantly
I think
Protestant.
Brad just froze. Or did I freeze?
Can you hear me
Everybody
now?
froze. Okay.
Can you hear me
Yeah,
now?
we can hear you fine.
Okay.
Yes.
So I was amazed at how compassionately I was treated by the nurses and by the staff and so forth. And looking back on it, I think it was probably an outreach to a community by the Roman Catholics and probably run by Roman Catholic business owners. And I got to thinking, well, maybe St. Jude's is like that. And so when Kenneth Conser was asked about Roman Catholics, he said, well, which ones are you talking about? They're evangelical Catholics or the other Catholics? And so I'm wondering how this would compare to business models that are run by Catholic organizations.
So what I have written, Brad, is not a business model.
Oh,
What I have written is a theology.
yeah.
And so this hopefully will, it'll fit with an EOS system. It'll fit with a number of other types of business models because I'm really focused in my book anyways, Brad, I'm really focused on the role of the business owner, not how the business owner does business. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so.
So I'm really, because this happened to me, I owned a business and I kept looking around for something that would help me understand what my stewardship responsibilities were to the Lord as a business owner, and I couldn't find it. I wrote the book that I wanted to read, but I couldn't find. The closest thing I could find was Craig Blomberg's Give Me Neither Poverty Nor Riches. That was the closest book I could find. And so now I do have a Christian business reference architecture out at Bible and Business. And it's an architecture that if you're starting or running a business you want to make sure you've covered all your bases in terms of how you're putting your business model together, I have a reference architecture out there for that. But this book in particular is just a theology. It's not meant to be a business model.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome. Moving on, the fourth thing, I think you start your group with a small group of owners. I think if you can get 3 to 5 owners to join with you, that's probably the best way to start. Let them help define the ministry and help define the materials, the culture, the values, and other details. And Dan, this goes back to your question. Yeah, you could use my book. It's kind of heavy, I've learned. And not a lot of business owners like to read heavy stuff, but I think you can get C12 materials, but Dan, you probably are the better person on this Zoom call to say, here's other materials for groups like this. I don't know I don't have a wide range of knowledge on that.
All right, check out the Faith-Driven Entrepreneur. They're only about 18 months in the market. And what they're doing is trying to reach out to fledgling new entrepreneurial groups, and they have created a whole series of material content. There's blogs, and then there's this 8-week course where they take you through some of the basics for somebody that's considering making a Christian business. They also have a second side to their organization, which is all about venture capital. So they're also trying to pull together people that would like to support fledgling businesses through investments. So they're covering both sides of this, but it's a brand new thing. It's a little over a year that they're doing this, and they've got content, and that content will get you started, but you'll have to build on that if you're going to make a group and extend it. So I'm always looking for more content.
Yep. Yep. You know, I talked with Mike Sharrow. Do you know Mike at C12, the president of C12 down in San Antonio?
I have been interviewed by C12, and I've had several conversations with the C12 people, but all my time was spent with Truth and Work.
So Mike told me that they are trying to generate enough content that a guy or a gal in one of their C12 groups does not have a repeat of content over a 10-year period.
That's a good goal.
Yeah. All right. You also got to deal with conflicts of interest here in these groups, because these groups will attract networkers. Whenever you get more than 3 or 4 business owners in the same room, there's a bunch of other people who want to sell them stuff. And so you got to really deal with this stuff up front. You got to deal with all the bad stuff that could potentially happen, and how you're going to manage that. So what happens if 2 of the guys or gals in the group go into business together and the business heads south, or one of them hires the other one and the one doesn't do a good job and they don't get paid or something like that? You gotta really look at what happens when things go bad. Okay, what happens if there's cliques that develop, and then out of those cliques you get certain business opportunities shared amongst the clique, but not with the other members of the group? Are you going to allow members to go into business together? I would really shy away from that, quite frankly. I would tell people that as long as they're in the group, they cannot do business with other people in the group. That's where I would go. So I would really look at those dual relationships piece. I would look at that really hard. And in order to be a part of this group, you're going to have to sign something that says, I will abide by these, what I call conflicts of interest agreement. You might have a different name for it. I don't have a dog in the race as to what you name it. Any questions or thoughts on this?
There's one other thing you'll have to consider, and that will be when you get to some of these marginal or fringe kinds of issues, LBGT, you're going to do this, do that. You need to make sure you're clear up front what your values are. And I would push people towards the Nashville agreement that is out there. You can just find it under Nashville. It is a very well-researched biblical document on values, core conservative Christian values, signed by a lot of good quality people. And I know at Truth at Work, we went ahead and just basically adopted that as our standard. And then when we had people say, gee, can we take on a gay member, or can we take on a this or that, or whatever flavor color they wanted, the issues were clear, stated, and in front of us.
Very good. Thank you, Dan. All right, that's it. So 5 things. I'll run through them again real quick. Number 1, gain the support of your pastors and elders. Number 2, define the purpose and the audience for the group at church. Get your plan of action put together. Start with a small group of owners who are willing to invest in this as a core ministry that they have within the church, and make sure you handle your conflicts of interest agreements. There might be other things that you run into. If anybody does try to do this in their churches, I'd love to know how it went. I haven't seen a church do this yet. So any questions? There you go. There's the question girl. Any questions or any more conversations that you want to have?
You have a recommendation?
I'm sorry?
You have a recommendation for a best business ethics book?
I do not. I'm sorry.
This isn't a book, business ethics book as far as from a Christian perspective, but there's a book I'm reading right now called Unoffendable, and just the way that we do business as Christians in a secular world and also in a Christian worldview and place. We've been saved and redeemed by God's grace. And so we should be the least offendable people on the planet. And it's revamping just the way I see people, the way I encounter issues and problems. And I would certainly highly recommend it. It's not necessarily a business book per se, but as far as to bring a life-giving savior into a secular place or even into our churches, that would definitely be a great book I would recommend.
You have ways of teaching business people how to relate to nonprofits, or how to judge nonprofits, or how nonprofits might. I know that this should not be a method of networking, but how do nonprofits that have great needs network with the business people within a church?
Yeah, informally, what I tell business owners when they're looking at donating, especially larger sums to nonprofits, I tell them to really spend time with the leadership and see if the leadership really understands what they're doing. They'll understand their cause, right? They'll understand kind of their call, but do they understand how to run a nonprofit profitably? And what I encourage them to do is to check out the long-term plans and the past performance against those long-term plans. Does the nonprofit know how to plan? Do they know where they're going? And do they know how to achieve those goals?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's an excellent book by David W. Gill, Doing Right. Someone was asking about what was the recommendation for Christian business ethics?
Thank you, Jinsuk.
You're welcome.
Is there any other way I can be helpful to you all today?
Yeah, just another question. Again, the early stages seemed to be that there was an interest in pastoral care to business owners and the caring for them, you know, being prepared to pray with them and so forth. And then you've moved across to stewardship, leveraging assets, how to be salt and light, these sort of instructions. Where's the crossover?
I understand your question. I'm not sure how to answer it. I think I understand your question. The context of the group, the person who's going to lead that kind of a group in a church is probably not going to be a pastor, but you're going to want your pastors to be involved at some level, even if it's just at the keeping them in the loop level, right? Most pastors are probably not going to want this ministry directly on their plate. But I did make the assumption early on that most people here are either pastors or going to be pastors. I didn't realize the breadth of the audience here on this call, and that might have been part of the reason why I shifted my gears a little bit.
Any other questions for Bill or comments? So we really appreciate it. Very interesting, Bill. I'm very thankful for your time today. And also for the other input of you did a great job of bringing out input from other people and suggestions about what they're doing. I'll have a question. I've heard both of you say C12, you and Dan say C12 several times, and I confess my ignorance. Can you tell me what that stands for, or what that is?
I forget what C12 stands for. Dan, do you know by chance? It started out as a group of Christians who wanted to act like a board of directors to other Christian business owners. I think that was the informal genesis of that ministry, and now it's a national, basically peer group for Christian business owners, and it's called C12. I don't know if the 12 refers to the disciples. I don't know.
I got the impression that it was based around the disciples. I've got the book in the other room. I could actually go look it up, but that's what a lot of the groups are doing. Truth at Work, same thing. They get about a dozen people, because typically once a month when they're meeting, they'll have one of the companies in the group make a presentation and analyze it and take it apart and try to support it and so forth. And 12 is a good number that way.
So Sean Terry just posted a link in the chat area if you want to take a look at that.
Well, just as the host of the meeting, again, I want to say thank you, and we have a few more minutes if anyone has any other questions for Mr. English. Okay, good. Well, seeing and hearing no questions, thank you everyone for participating today. And again, Bill, we thank you very much for the generous gift of your time and your expertise.
You're welcome. You're
Yeah.
welcome.
And I can say thank you for sending your son here to our school too. Thank you for the gift of your own offspring.
Well, I tried to get him to go to Trinity and he'd have none of this. So he's at
Yeah.
Southern now.
Yeah,
So.
well, we're honored to host him. So yeah, I look forward to communicating more with you offline. And if people do want to contact you, is the best way through your website? Is that if someone wanted to email you about speaking or about your book or something, what would be the best way to contact you?
Just email me at bill@bibleandbusiness, bibleandbusiness.com. So it's bill@bibleandbusiness.com.
Great. Thanks again, Bill. And
You bet.
I'm gonna shut off the meeting here in a moment. And the recording of this will be made available on the Faith and Work Project YouTube channel soon. All right. Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.